Today we're going to look at some of the hardest games that I ever played on the Commodore Amiga. If it weren't for cheats, I'd not have gotten very far in these games and probably wouldn't have liked them and played them half as much as I did. This isn't a definitive list of the hardest Amiga games ever made, although I'm sure most of you Amiga users will already be familiar with these. This is just a list of the ones that I found difficult. I would recommend these games a lot. They're all very good games for very different reasons, just don't expect any of them to be a walk in the park. My introduction to this series was when my dad brought home a copy of the second game, which is a game that I'm far more familiar with. It had one of the greatest intros to any game on the Amiga, full stop. The Shadow of the Beast games are notoriously difficult, but so well designed that you still want to keep playing. Sure, a lot of games on the Amiga were difficult by today's standards, but I can't put into words how frustrating it was playing Shadow of the Beast 2 for the first time, and I still can't get anywhere on it today. Shadow of the Beast 2 was released in 1990 and is one of many excellent games published by Psygnosis. I don't know about you, but I seem to spend more time watching the game over screen than actually playing it, which isn't a bad thing because the game over screen in Shadow of the Beast 2 is just as good as the intro. Surprisingly, I read through a few magazine reviews and not once did anybody mention the difficulty. I suppose in the days of the Amiga a difficult game isn't anything out of the ordinary, and so the only complaints the magazines gave Shadow of the Beast 2 related to the long loading times every time you lost a life, but again, that game over screen is excellent. Maybe not as impressive when you learn that the music was directly ripped from an episode of Miami Vice, but it's still got an eerie quality which you'll find throughout the entire game. This is one of them games that I'm sure most will agree is a difficult game, but it's just so much fun to play. Developed by the Bitmap brothers and published by Renegade Software in 1993, it's an Amiga classic. The Chaos Engine was a steampunk-themed top-down run-and-gun game. Originally made for the Commodore Amiga, it was so popular that it was even ported to the Sega Master System and Super Nintendo. The multiplayer is where the fun really shines in this game, but even in single-player, the computer-controlled AI feels like another person is playing, and I can only imagine how hard this game would be if it weren't for your companion. I've owned this game for most of my life, and believe it or not, it wasn't until recently that I could even get past the first few stages, and finally made it to the shop. The difficulty can't have put too many people off, as it's a game which is still being talked about to this day and still loved by many. I've seen many people compare this game to Gauntlet, which is fair enough. It's very similar, but I find this game much more fun to play. Despite the difficulty, it has great music throughout and addictive gameplay. Now, if you've been watching this channel for some time, you'll probably know that I really do love the Dizzy games, even though I've barely ever covered them on this channel yet. But I love the Dizzy games across all platforms, but I first played this one on the Amiga. Spellbound Dizzy is, in my opinion, the hardest Dizzy game ever made. Some people found Treasure Island Dizzy hard as it only gives you the one life to play with, but this is the one that I struggle with the most. I'm not sure how this happened, but I owned an original box copy which somehow had unlimited lives built into it, which helped me out a great deal. Not only do I consider this the hardest game in the series, but it's also the Dizzy game that I like the least. So I'm very surprised to read that Amiga Force magazine describes Spellbound Dizzy as the best adventure that Dizzy had ever had. As well as it being my least favourite Dizzy game, I also never liked how this game looked and personally think it looked far better on earlier systems. It's not a bad game. I think because I came to it late, it may have affected how much I like it, but then again, I never played Prince of the Yoke Folk as a kid, and I bloody love that game. There's a part of Spellbound Dizzy where you have to keep going back and forth to pick up the correct number of rocks and able to weigh you down enough to be able to travel down a windy shaft, and it gets really monotonous. It's not like you can just store a bunch of rocks next to the shaft ready for when you need to use them, because once Dizzy drops a rock it shatters into pieces, forcing you to go all the way back and collect some more. The music on the Amiga version though is great, and like I say, it's definitely not a bad game, it's just hard. Okay, so this game is balls hard on any system, let alone the arcade original, but this game was ported to the Amiga and it kicked my ass regularly. It's Ghosts and Goblins. Originally released in 1985, it was ported to the Amiga in 1990, and although critics favoured the earlier C64 version, it's still a generally good version of the game. You can't tell from this footage, but I've actually got a lot better on this game over the years, especially the arcade game. You control Sir Arthur on a quest to rescue Princess Prin Prin from Satan himself. In this version, you're given 6 lives. If you hit once, you lose your armour. Hit a second time, and you'll lose a life. Very similar to how the mushroom power-ups work in the Super Mario games. Game developer Tokuro Fujiwara was working on this game at the same time as he was working on the game Commander, but stated in an interview that of the two, Ghosts and Goblins was the most fun to make. When the game was tested in arcades, developers would carefully watch players in order to determine which parts of the game to make harder. There are plenty of versions of Ghosts and Goblins out there, and you won't find any of them easier than the other. But I always like this Commodore Amiga version, and it is very hard. Some games are hard, but not unfairly hard. This one takes a biscuit. It's not only the hardest game I ever owned on the Amiga, it's probably the hardest game I've ever played, period. I've never been the best at shmups, let alone this one. This is projext-X. Developed and published by Team 17 for the Amiga in 1992, and if you want a challenge, then look no further. This game is painfully difficult, and I don't know how anybody in the right mind got anywhere in this game without either years and years of practice or using cheats, like I did. Originally, before I had the boxed copy, I had a cracked version of this game with the cheats built in, and if it weren't for those cheats, I wouldn't have been able to appreciate this game at all. It's an Amiga game, so you can guarantee that it looks awesome and has an awesome soundtrack. It's just hard to enjoy the graphics and music when you're getting your arse handed back to you on a plate every 15 seconds. If you like your shmups, or you just want to play something that's going to leave you curled up in a ball crying for mummy, then go ahead, be my guest. Give projext-X a go on the Commodore Amiga. I've seen many videos and read numerous forum posts over the years regarding difficult Amiga games, and I've never seen this game get mentioned. Again, it's very unfair, but I was dying to play it as I liked the films a lot. Gremlins 2 The New Batch is a platform game and was met with understandably mixed reviews. Dispo. It doesn't really control well for one. Your Amiga magazine in December 1990 were pretty spot on when they said that all the ingredients were there for a great game, but it's just far too hard. I have to say that it's my favourite game based on any of the Gremlins games, maybe because of nostalgia. In fact, yeah, it must be nostalgia because quite frankly this game is a steaming pile of rock solid shit. It does however have one redeeming feature. You're going to be seeing a lot of it if you play for yourself, but the game over screen, like Shadow of the Beast 2, is one of my favourites on the Amiga. I just wish the game was as good. You've been watching Walking the Cow Gaming and Nostalgia on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to let me know if you're planning on trying any of these out. I'd be interested to hear your opinions on them. Remember to hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more gaming and nostalgia related content here on YouTube. I'm going to leave you with Gremlins 2's only redeeming feature, and that's the awesome Game Over theme. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you soon. Bye for now.